Teacher, how can I remember vocabulary more easily? If you have problems remembering words in English, this is the perfect lesson for you. Coming up. Hey friends, Teacher Prix here to help you talk to anyone, anywhere, anytime in English. First and foremost, thank you so much for watching this lesson. Make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any of my weekly videos. Now to the subject of this video. Teacher, how can I remember English vocabulary more easily? I study words, but I forget them. Any suggestions? Of course, I'm going to give you 3 recommendations. But before I give you the main recommendations of this lesson, it is very important to understand the difference between relevant vocabulary and different vocabulary. I know that in most situations we use YouTube as an entertainment source. And it's okay, I do the same. But when it comes to your English fluency, if you want to master English vocabulary and really remember words more easily, it's also important to use your time wisely. What does it have to do with relevant vocabulary and different vocabulary? There are many lessons on YouTube, and sometimes we get curious about interesting, funny words. But those funny words are not really relevant to conversations in English, to meaningful conversations, describing important things in your life, experiences, talking about your job, or when you're traveling abroad, going on a vacation, useful vocabulary that you will actually use. In your study routine, be careful not to spend way too much time watching cool lessons about street language or slang, because at the end of the day, that's not really what you're going to be using in real life conversation. Okay, Teacher Prix, I get it, but what is relevant vocabulary? Now, to think of the kind of vocabulary you should spend time studying, you need to consider the subject, a conversation subject that you want to master. Because at the end of the day, you're watching this lesson because you want to speak English with more confidence, and to do that, you need vocabulary. So if you want to build up your conversation skills, your speaking skills, you need to think of conversation subjects for you to work on. And to work on those conversation subjects, you will need to spend time working on them, like during your study time. There are so many things you can talk about. But whenever you sit down to study on your routine every week, you should focus on one particular subject that will help you get better at speaking, okay? That being said, tip number 1 will help you stay better organized during the week when you sit down to study vocabulary based on conversation subjects, which is keep an organized vocabulary notebook based on conversation subjects. So a year has 52 weeks, right? If I'm not wrong. Think of all the possible conversation subjects you can work on every week. Oh, but teacher, I'm very busy. Can I focus on one subject every 2 weeks? Yes, amazing. That will still give you 26 subjects, I guess, if you study one subject every 14 days. That is amazing. I'm not worried about quantity. I'm worried about quality. So have an organized notebook based on conversation subjects and group the words you study, vocabulary, expressions, phrasal verbs that will help you communicate about that particular subject. That will help you remember vocabulary more easily because you are not studying vocabulary alone. You are focusing on a conversation subject. And what happens? Conversation subjects trigger memory. Yes, you will begin to remember things, situations, stories, life events, experiences, jokes. That is a much stronger connection, and you are involving the vocabulary you are studying. That way it gets easier to remember. This is what I do with my BSA, my students in my academy. Every lesson has a conversation subject, and based on the conversation subject, they learn specific phrasal verbs, nouns, adjectives, verbs, idioms, expressions to help them connect with the lesson subject, the conversation subject. Next tip, tip number 2. Whenever you learn a new word that should be connected with the conversation subject, I want you to explain that word to yourself orally. aloud. So you learned a new word, you Googled that word, you looked it up, you found the meaning. Now you are going to explain that word to yourself orally using your voice. There's more. Once you've done that, then you're going to grab your notebook and you're going to write the explanation by using your hand. Don't use your computer. When you use your hand, you are using physical memory. That is very powerful. You remember more information when you actually write the information you're studying. After that, I want you to read that explanation again aloud. And then create examples. You don't need to create many examples. You can create one. You know, here on my channel, I always bring videos about phrasal verbs. And what I tell you guys to do, I do them myself. So for example, when I Google the phrasal verbs I want to teach, I study them, I read them aloud, I create examples, I Google articles where I can find the phrasal verbs that I want to teach. And why? Because I'm not just teaching, I am studying as well. Even though I know those phrasal verbs, in most situations I know them, it's also important to remember them. And to do that, I create my own examples. So whenever you watch my lessons here on YouTube, I am creating those examples. I am practicing. I write them down because I know the power of writing information down and creating examples. So when you do that, you are going to be implementing a very powerful vocabulary practice that will allow you to remember words more easily. That's your goal. That's why you're here, okay? To top it off, you can record your voice creating more examples. Oh, but teacher, what if I can't create more examples? Then record yourself reading the examples you have created. That's better than not recording yourself at all. Recording yourself is very powerful. You are also stimulating different ways of memorizing vocabulary, okay? When I was in college and I had to prepare myself for an exam, I would record myself reading my answers, explaining the concepts of the lessons that I had to prepare myself for. I would write and I would read. I was working on different channels to help me remember information for the exam. It is the same thing with English vocabulary. Use different channels in your favor by listening to your voice, by recording your voice reading or creating examples. You are strengthening your memory muscle. And that's what you need to do if you want to become better at remembering words in English, okay? And hey, if you are enjoying this lesson, before I give you tip number 3, I would like to ask your support by hitting the like button and subscribing to my channel. YouTube reports show me that more than 51% of people who watch my lessons, like my lessons, are not subscribed. So take the time to subscribe now. Tip number 3, associate that new word you're learning with something you already know or are already familiar with. Basically, what I'm trying to do here is also a memory exercise. You can associate something new with something you already know in your mind, something you're already familiar with. And it doesn't necessarily need to be only vocabulary. I'll give you some suggestions. One very practical way to do that is to connect synonyms and opposites. So I can connect the new word with a similar word I already know, or I can connect that word, that new word, with its opposite that I know. So that is one way to do it. Another thing that you can do, use visual aids. Post-its. I love post-its. I have many post-its here. Well, these are the ones I use to write things on. Create the examples here. And you can use tip number 1, use the synonyms and write them. Oh, but teacher, I have a flashcard app. This is more useful because you're using your physical memory. Then you can post it somewhere. You know, I have many post-its here on my wall. Maybe you can't see them. I don't think you can. But I have post-its here on my wall. Then I connect. I'm connecting the new vocabulary with something else. And that way I can be more productive with my memory exercise. At the end of the day, we're also working on your memory strength. Another thing that you can do is, this is my favorite actually, I want you to connect that new word with something in your life. Remember your main goal with the vocabulary. You want to talk about things. You want to understand things. And by connecting a new word with a life experience, a life story. You are strengthening your memory muscle, but you're also creating a very strong bond between that new word and your brain. Why? Because of the story you're telling, because of the story where you are using that new word. For example, I learned a new word a few days ago, okay? A few days, no, maybe a week ago, because I'm recording this video today. Yes, it was about a week ago. And I learned the word inkling, which is a synonym of suspicion. And I saw this word many, many times in the book that I was reading. So I followed the recommendation that I'm giving here to you guys. I wrote the word inkling in a post-it, and then I wrote the word suspicion in the same post-it. Then what I did later was to create examples. And in the book, I don't have the book here, it's in my bedroom, but in the book where I found the word inkling. So whenever I see the word inkling, I write the word suspicion, and then I speak it aloud. You know, I had this inkling. I couldn't explain that something was going to happen. And bang, it did. And that way, it is easier for me to remember the words that I learned. So I am connecting visual, I am writing, I'm using my physical memory, and that way I am strengthening my memory muscle. That's what you need to do. Now, bonus tip, don't get, and this is counterintuitive, don't get too stressed out about remembering words. Focus on the experience and being able to communicate and express yourself. Fluency is not about knowing all the words in English, because that's never going to happen. But instead, focus on communicating what you want with the vocabulary you already have. Because the more you obsess about memorizing words, remembering more words, the more you will forget them, the harder it'll get to memorize them. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. If you got to this point, make sure to type value, #value in the comments. That way I will know that you enjoyed this lesson, but more importantly, I will know that I was able to help you with something meaningful. Other than that, share, like, and subscribe. Bye-bye.